That was just great hearing Christine come and share that, and Laura as well. I could sit down.
Yes.
Kind of did my job, but it's just God's. You know, He's talking to us this morning, even before I've stood up here. Well, foundations, it's all done. Been working away, we've got our way through, and thank you for bearing with us. I know that's a little unusual, a little different, but it's been important to do that, and we're going to round it off this morning by talking about church membership and why that's important and what exactly that means. We have finally got booklets all printed, and they'll be given out at the end. You will notice when you get them that they're slightly small print, which for most of you will be fine. However, if you find that that print is a little too small, don't feel embarrassed or anything. Come and ask me, and we'll get some larger print copies for anybody that wants a large print copy. Those booklets have got everything that we've been through. Now, obviously, we've been expounding slightly, so it's condensed, but everything's in there. The scripture references are all in there. I'd encourage you to read them, even if that's just flicking through. That's up to you how well you read them, and particularly if you had any questions, to read through them as well. And we will be having a question and answer evening at some point in the next couple of weeks. We're trying to work out exactly how best to do that. Obviously, our foundations talk's ended up going on a bit longer with our gap in the middle, and we're on the doorstep of Easter, but we will have that question and answer session. But obviously, you've got the booklets now. If you read the booklets and you didn't have a question, and then you do after reading it, then we will have that evening available for people. So, church membership. Well, when we're talking about church membership, what we need to do is look at the idea of covenants. Now, in legal terms, a covenant is a formal agreement or a promise between two or more people. This gives us a rough idea, but it's a lot deeper than that when we're talking about covenants in the biblical term. Sure, most people who know their Bible's been in church a long time would be able to straight away pull out some of the covenants from the Old Testament. Right, let's do it. Covenants from the Old Testament. Anybody? Yep. Mosaic. Yep. Covenant with Noah. So, you know, we know these things from our Bible stories. We see them there. It's so much more than that. When it comes to God's covenants with us, with His people, you see, God knows what's best. In God's covenants with mankind, He commits Himself to us with these solemn promises. And it's not God that ever breaks those covenants, but it's us. And in fact, when you look at these Old Testament covenants, that's the problem. That's what happens with the Israelites. We're going to look at two covenants this morning in looking at church membership. Hebrews 8 is a great passage for this. I'm not going to read Hebrews 8 because otherwise we'll spend all morning just reading through Hebrews 8. I would encourage you, if you want to get a good grip or a good idea of biblical covenants, that Hebrews 8 would be a great thing for you to read this week. But Hebrews 8 explains these covenants really well. In Hebrews 8, it explains the covenant that God made with Israel when He took them out of Egypt. And it also explains how He then made a new covenant with the church when Jesus died for the church and rose from the dead. The first covenant created the nation of Israel, and the new covenant created the church, the true spiritual Israel. Now, these covenants and the other covenants we see in the Old Testament are between humans and God, and they were always been initiated by God. And the reason that they're relevant this morning, as we're talking about church membership, or if you like, covenant among believers, is that both of them are designed to bring people into a special relationship with God and with each other. The big differences between the two covenants we just looked at is that the Israelites and us as humans can't ever keep the end of a covenant. When the Mosaic law was set out, there was not a single Israelite who could keep that law, who could keep that covenant with God. That is until Christ. And this new covenant that God made with us, when he sent Christ, it was Christ that fulfilled our side, the human side of the covenant that we couldn't. He came into our place and he did that. And that's the redemption story. And actually, you can trace that through the Old Testament. When you look at all of these covenants and then the new covenant with Christ, it's Christ fulfilling what we can't. At the Last Supper, Jesus took the cup and said, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." The many is us. It's the church. It's the believers, the followers of Christ. When Jesus died and rose again, it was God's final act to create a people for himself, not only by purchasing their forgiveness, but also by purchasing their faith and their obedience in fulfillment of his new covenant promise with us. We can't break this covenant with God because he's already fulfilled it on our behalf, which is just incredible. And as Christians, we exist. You and I, we exist because of that new covenant promises. And the new covenant creates the church as a whole, the whole body of believers. The new covenant creates this church, King's Church, Stowmarket. We wouldn't be here without that new covenant. Christ has created us by a covenant to be his people, not just as individuals, but as a body. Talked about being a body through the Foundations course, how we each have a different part to play. And what a great picture that was this morning as well from Christine. You know, those cows, they were mooing, they were, come on, get up, get on. And the sheep as well, bleating away. Come on. All these different members of the body supporting another one. The key part of that calling, that covenant to be a body, is worked out through the forming of gatherings of Christians, churches. That covenant creates the church as a whole, the whole body of believers, but that covenant creates churches. This is an outworking of that covenant. We see it all through the New Testament, the outworking of the covenant. And despite opposition and persecution, the New Testament church grows and the gospel word spreads. New churches are planted. Paul travels everywhere. We've seen that already in various preaching series that we've done through various New Testament books and letters. You know, Paul got around. He got around a lot. And he was spreading the gospel, but he was also encouraging and teaching the gathering of believers. People are meeting in temples, in public buildings, in each other's homes. So if we look at church membership, not as an arbitrary decision, not as just some administrative exercise, a box-ticking exercise, but if we look at church membership in light of that covenant relationship, then in some ways church membership is also making a covenant together with each other to pursue God together, to pursue his word, to be believers together, to be living together as one body. And that's what makes church membership so much more important than just some idea or some box-ticking exercise. To be a member of a church is to enter into a covenant with your brothers and sisters in that church. The Reverend Michael E. Osborne writes that the covenantal nature of church membership is very precious to God. And when we covenant with other believers, we are imitating God. So, if you will, that's the why. Covenant relationship. The new covenant leads us to church, leads us to church membership. But there's more to it than that. And I'm going to go through some benefits, if you will, or some reasons for having church membership, for committing to church membership, for committing to covenant with each other in a church body. During the Foundations course, we talked a little bit about Ephesians 4 ministry, and as I promised, we'll be talking about that a lot more in our Ephesians series. Spoiler. Part of being the body of Christ together works through being an Ephesians 4 ministry church. Ephesians 4:16 says, from him, that's Christ, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. Church membership, covenant, commitment to each other helps us to build that body. It gives us a framework for that to work. It brings family together. It helps us to do family well as a church. It helps us to live out that Ephesians 4 ministry, being a body together, each one of us with a different but equally important part to play. We believe in the gifts of the Spirit as an Ephesians 4 ministry, as a New Testament church. And we believe that each body part, each member, each believer in a church will have different giftings and different abilities, and they work together. In my teens, I was part of a youth worship band, and it will be no surprise to you to hear that I was a singer. As Alice pointed out earlier, I'm a loudmouth. But there's another very good reason for why I was a singer, other than the fact that I'm a loudmouth, and that's that I can't play any musical instruments. I've never had an affinity for it. I've never had a desire for it. And so joining this youth worship band, it would have been absolutely useless for me to stand up the front and play guitar or play the keyboard, because I would have made an awful noise, because I wouldn't have known what I was doing. And so this band worked. We had guitar, we had keyboard, we had singers and drummer. It worked because each one of us played the part that we were supposed to play. It's just a small picture of what church life is for us. Each one of us plays a different part. And that works in church membership because it gives us that structure. It helps us to live like family. Proverbs 27 verse 17 tells us, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Hebrews 10, 24 to 25. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. What a great analogy that was this morning. What a great picture, those animals spurring on their family member. You know, iron sharpens iron. We're called to be encouraging one another, in the habit of meeting regularly. A couple of Olympics ago, I remember watching triathlon, and some of you probably saw this too. There were two British brothers, the Brownlee brothers, and they were doing this triathlon together. And it was nearly the end. I mean, if you don't know what a triathlon is, it's absolutely mental. They cycle and swim and do a marathon. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's incredible. So they're at the end of this really long race, and Johnny is in the front. Johnny Brownlee's in the front. He's almost there. The finishing line is within sight. But he's just exhausted and he's broken. And suddenly his methodical running starts to slow and he starts to wobble. And suddenly he just, I mean, he looks drunk, but he's just exhausted. I mean, he looks like he's about to collapse. And it's just heartbreaking because the finishing line is right there. And suddenly, out of nowhere, his brother Alistair, who was running this race with him, Johnny had got ahead. Alistair suddenly appears from behind him. He's caught up with his brother, and he puts his arm around his brother and he hoists him up, and they hobble together. And his brother's just done the same race as him. I mean, his brother has got nothing left to give either. He's just as exhausted, but he drags his brother over the line. In fact, he even pushes him over the line so that he finishes first ahead of him. It was just incredible. I remember at the time watching that, and everyone was just stunned. The commentators were stunned. The crowd was stunned. It was such an amazing display of sacrificial love. That's what church family should be like. That's what we should be like to each other. Iron sharpening iron, loving each other like those brothers did. Running that race together. And, you know, that story starts with Johnny being ahead, because this race that we run, part of that race is a private race. And so we're all going to be at different stages and different points of that race. But there'll be times in that race when we need to be together and we need to be putting our arms around each other and pulling each other along, when we need to be mooing and bleating and saying, come on. This feeds into church membership, because if you know the family that you're a part of, then how much easier is it to be able to support your family, because you know who your family is. Church membership also provides for the reality of accountability to each other and to church leaders. And it's still family. This all links in with family, that idea of church family. Hebrews 13, verse 17. Have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority, because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. Do this so that their work will be a joy, not a burden, or that would be of no benefit to you. Without a church membership, without a commitment, without a covenant agreement between church family, between church members, it would be very difficult for leaders to determine who they're responsible for. Very, very difficult for leaders to understand who it is that I have that servant leadership for and over. Who is it I have that headship over? It's a church membership, family body, Christian body. It helps to bring in that structure. Helps to bring in that structure to be accountable to each other. Helps to bring in that structure to have that accountability and that trust in leaders. And it helps us, it helps me, John and Alistair. We know who it is we have that responsibility for, but it also gives us that ability and that opportunity to step in if we need to have a word, or to pray with someone, even to rebuke someone. That works the other way round as well, by the way, and this is why teams, leadership teams, are so important. And this is why we do not want to and will not install a single elder here at King's Church. We will wait and we will pursue an eldership team, however long that takes. And until that time, the leadership team is myself, John and Alistair. We're underneath that eldership that's at various levels, particularly under David Richardson. Because I'm just a human, right? And so one day I'm probably going to upset one of you. Okay, it's going to happen, and I'm really sorry. Okay, but I'm just a human. Okay, and if I say something that you disagree with, or I say something that's upset you, or I act rashly in a moment. If I'm on my own up here, you know, you think, well, how can I approach that leader that I've got a problem with? But I'm not on my own. I have John and I have Alistair. So you'd be able to go to one of them and say, look, I need to talk to him about that, but, you know, I want to talk to you. Help me here, you know. Need to have that body in place for that to work, you know. And me and John and Alistair, we have an accountability to each other as well. I'm sure many of you know already, but we meet up regularly, usually once a week, to have time together in discipleship and accountability together. And that's so important, because if I'm up here leading on my own, then who's there to call me out if I do act rashly or I do say something out of line? You've got to have that accountability, and we're trying to lead by example by through doing that. And it's important for you to have that accountability as well. That's not to say that everybody in the church should be accountable to everybody. Obviously, that's not appropriate. There will be things in your life that you only want to share with one or two others, but those people that you can be close with. And church membership, church family helps us to have those relationships, those close friendships where we can have that accountability and that openness with one another. Jesus teaches us in Matthew 18, 15 to 17. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault. Just between the two of you, if they listen to you, you have won them over. If they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. Right? If you don't have a proper church membership, a proper church body, who are you going to when you tell it to the church? Who are you going to when you go to find a brother or sister to help you in that? This is an outworking of the very teaching that Christ has given us. It's a structure that we can live in and live together under, that helps us to live out this life of believers. King's Church, Stowmarket, exists because of God's new covenant. His commitment to forgive our sins and make us people. Make us his people and be our God. As King's Church, Stowmarket, let us also exist because of our own church covenant, our own commitment to each other, our own commitment to family, our own commitment to this body together, a commitment to trust Christ and to follow his teaching together, to follow the apostles' teaching, to commit to meeting regularly, to worshipping together, praying together, learning and living together, to the sharing of the gospel. That's why we renewed this foundations course that we've been doing, and why we spent these Sundays together looking through it, so that you, all of you, can know what it is this church is about, what it is we believe, what it is we follow. And you can make the decision of whether or not you want to be a part of that, in membership with that, in commitment with that, with us and with each other. It's not totalitarian, it's not restrictive, okay? You know, this is something that can be abused, and we have to be careful of that. It's not that at all. If you are a member of King's Church, Stowmarket, don't worry, it's okay. It's perfectly all right to speak to other Christians, okay? You know, just this week, you know, I had an email from someone in the church telling me about this Pentecostal prayer meeting that they've been attending, and what an encouragement it had been to them. You know, in our prayer meetings recently, we've been praying into Ukraine, but before that, we've been praying into into the Open Doors World Watch List, you know, and what great work that Christian organisation does. I know that there's people in this church that have great links with the Christian Institute, and it's really good for us to be praying into those things too. Myself and Alistair recently met up with Jonathan and the leader of the Cedars Church, and Mike, the leader of New Life Church. You know, we're meeting up with other believers. So it's not being a member of a church isn't, well, that's the club that you're in and stay away from everybody else, whatever you do. It's not that at all, okay? Because over church membership and the importance of church body, we're still believers in Christ together, all right? Also, if you've been listening to this foundation course and I'm talking about church membership today, and you think to yourself, well, you know what, I'm not quite ready to commit to this church at the moment, or I don't feel it's quite right, but I still quite enjoy coming along and listening to the teaching or worshiping with these people, that's fine. You can still come next Sunday. That's not a problem at all. It's not a, you have to be a member. If you don't show me your King's Church membership card at the door from next Sunday, I'm not letting you in. It's not like that at all, okay? This idea of membership is an important one. It's something sacred. It's something special. But there's obviously a lot more to that as well. And people are very welcome here, regardless of whether they want to be a member of King's Church or not. And of course, people can go and talk to other Christians and be involved with other things as well. I was chatting with John about church membership, and he reflected to me about Moses and his brother-in-law in Numbers 10. This is Moses talking to Hobab, and he's trying to encourage him. He's asking him to come with them to the promised land. So this is Numbers 10, verse 29. Moses says, we're setting out for the place of which the Lord said, I will give it to you. Come with us, and we will do good to you. For the Lord has promised good to Israel. And a little further on, verse 32, and if you do go with us, whatever good the Lord will do to us, the same will we do to you. I'm not saying that we won't be good to you and that God won't bless you if you're not a member of King's Church, or indeed a member of any church. So don't hear what I'm not saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there is something more to being a member of a church. There's that idea of what, come with us. We'll share in this together. Come be a part of King's Church in covenant commitment to us, to each other. We'll take you with us. We'll go along as a family through all of the ups and downs. And it's a journey that we're on together. You're a committed member of the church, and you are a part of the family, a part of the body. And everything we've talked about this morning and everything we've been looking through in the foundations course comes with that. My wife read through this. She always reads through my preachers before I do them. Partly because I'm dyslexic and sometimes things don't make sense because I use the wrong word. But partly as well spiritually. It's just great to have that other eye, and I trust her. And she said, this is great. She said, but what about practical implications? I said, brilliant, thank you. This is why I asked you to read things first. So as we talk about membership here at King's Church, what is the practical implication of that as we come to the end of this foundations course together? Well, the practical implications of being a member of King's Church Stowmarket is committing to regular meeting, not just Sundays, but for example, life groups, prayer meetings, men's breakfasts, women's evenings. It's committing to doing that life together, that body together, that family together, not out of legalism. So, you know, if you're not here on Sunday, I'm not going to come knocking on your door until you've missed a Sunday. How good you! We're all going to be busy. We all have different things to do. We all have life to live, but it's living that life together, committing to living that life with one another. You're committing to being a body part, to serving the church, to serving each other. And that looks different to every person because we've all got different giftings and different abilities and different callings. We've all got different things going on in our life, different businesses. So there's different things people can't commit to, but it's a commitment to being an active body part in this church. It's committing to the headship of the leaders and eventually the headship of the team of elders. It's committing to our values and our doctrines that we've been going through on this foundation course. And again, I'll say this again, as I said before, that doesn't mean we're telling you have to believe everything we say, you have to follow everything we say, because as I said earlier, it's not totalitarian. I'll be very, very surprised if we've been through this foundations course and everybody's thought everything, yes, it's okay to have a difference of an opinion, it's okay to have different ideas, but the thing that comes with being a part of a church family, being a member of the church, is that even if there's bits that you disagree with, you're saying, well, I'll come underneath that doctrine and that value package because I'm with these people. You know, and if there's something you disagree on, great, let's have debates, you know, let's have chats, let's pray together, that's fine. But it's coming underneath and saying, yeah, I'm with this and I'm going with this. And finally, a word on tithing, because this is obviously an important thing and many people would ask about this in relation to church membership. I talked about giving before here at King's Church, and again, I'd like to reiterate that I'm not asking anybody to tithe, I'm not asking anybody to give, because I don't believe that's up to me. I believe that's between you and God. Okay? I believe that Jesus makes it clear it's about our hearts. So as church members, if you're a member of King's Church, you're committing to being a joyful giver. You're committing to not being caught up in law or guilt when it comes to money matters, as with everything in our life, in our walk of life. But I will say this, and it's a slightly glib saying, so you'll forgive me for that, but there's a saying that says, put your money where your mouth is. And I don't say that in any way to guilt anybody or to pressure anybody, but you know, if you're with a church and you're part of a family, then that's everything. Okay, so finances as well, but it's between you and God how you work that out in your life and how you work that out with your church family. I'm not going to stand up here and tell people, well, you have to do this or you have to do that. You know, and I think in the West particularly, money is quite a tricky issue. So let's just do what Jesus said. Okay, let's be joyful givers. Let's just have a heart where everything in our lives, whatever it is, even if it's money, we're giving that to God and we're living under his teaching. I'm not going to ask you all to stand up or to have a show of hands. I don't think that would be right, and I think there's peer pressure and things that come through that as well. The way that this would work normally, and the way this will work from now on, is that if somebody new starts to come along to King's Church and they're showing interest, they've been here for a while, well then I'll invite them to come along and do the foundations course with me across 6 evenings. I'll go through the material with them that we've gone through together, and then we'll have a discussion about church membership at the end. Well, I don't want anybody to feel robbed of that because we've done it all as a big thing. Okay, so what we're going to do is me, Alice and John, we're going to meet up and discuss exactly how we'll do this, but we're thinking that we'll email out to everybody, and it won't be just a blanket email, it will be an individual email that I'll be writing to each person. Now, for some of you, that'll be fine. You're going to respond to that email and say, yeah, I want to be a church member. In fact, for some of you, and I can see some faces here that have been here for longer than I have, you already did the foundations course when we were doing, well, it was called the Into the Family course back then. You've done that, and you've already been a committed member of this church since before I ever walked through the door. So this is an opportunity for you to just refresh or reaffirm that commitment. And so for many of you, though, it will just be a simple well, yes, I am already, and I wish to continue being a church member. It's important for us to refresh that, I think, because a lot has changed for King's Church. You know, you've got a new leadership team there, even if one of them was there at the beginning, he's back again. We've got a new leadership team here. We've been through a lot as a church, and obviously we've been through a lot as a country as well with COVID. So it's important that we have this opportunity. For those of you that have only recently started coming to church, coming here to King's Church, you know, there might be more of a conversation that needs to be had. You might have questions, you might want to discuss things, that's fine. So we'll have those emails as a point of contact. If just a simple reply is all you need, great. If you want to meet up and chat, that's fine. Let me know, I'll do that. We'll work that through. I don't want to rob anyone of that opportunity to have a deep conversation and to ask questions. Remember, we will be having that evening to ask questions as well, but it might be that you want an individual opportunity to just have a chat. That's fine. We're not going to give out membership cards or anything like that. We will have a list we'll draw up, and our administrator will do this because that's what he's good at. We'll draw up a list of those that have either recommitted or committed to the church, so that we're clear ourselves as a leadership team, well, who are our members. And like I said, from now on, new people come through, they do the foundations course and come into the family, hopefully. That's everything I wanted to say on church membership this morning. I want to thank all of you for sticking through this foundation course. And I just want to say, you know, you're very, very welcome here. And I think we've been having a wonderful time since we moved to this barn, being a family together. And it honestly is a joy and a delight to be family with you.